The neutral station floated in the empty space between human and Cathari territory. It was a massive structure built decades ago for meetings that had never produced lasting peace. Now it would host the most important gathering in the history of both species. Daniel stood at the window of his quarters and watched ships from both sides arrive, their weapons powered down but ready to activate at the first sign of betrayal. Scifical entered the room behind him. She had spent the journey here, preparing him for what was to come. "Are you ready?" she asked. Daniel turned to face her. In the months since he had first seen her on Vethra Prime, she had become something he had never expected. She was his protector, his advocate, and perhaps something close to a friend. "I don't know if anyone can be ready for something like this. Two civilizations trying to stop a war that has killed millions. What can one person possibly say that would make a difference?" "You are not one person," Scifical replied. "You are a symbol of what is possible. You are proof that humans and Cathari can look at each other and see something other than enemies." The negotiations began in a vast chamber at the center of the station. Human admirals in crisp uniforms sat on one side. Cathari war mothers in their gleaming armor sat on the other. Between them stretched a gulf of hatred and grief that seemed impossible to cross. Daniel watched as representatives from both sides traded accusations. They spoke of battles won and lost, of worlds destroyed, of families torn apart by violence. They demanded concessions that the other side could never accept. They threatened renewed offensives and total war. The talks were failing before they had truly begun. Then Scifical stood. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to the fearsome war mother who had brought a human into Cathari space. "I wish to present testimony," she said. "Not from a diplomat or a general. From someone who has seen both our peoples and understands what we share." She gestured to Daniel, who rose from his seat on trembling legs. Daniel walked to the center of the chamber and looked around at the faces watching him. Human faces marked by suspicion and doubt. Cathari faces that were alien but somehow no longer strange. He thought about all the words he had prepared, all the arguments and appeals he had practiced. Then he set them aside and spoke from his heart. "I am not a diplomat," he began. "I'm a medic. My job was to patch up wounded soldiers so they could go back to fighting. I did that for 3 years. I watched good people die on both sides of this war. I saw things that will never leave me, no matter how long I live." He paused and gathered his thoughts. "On Vethra Prime, I found a child trapped in the rubble of a destroyed building. She was hurt and afraid and alone. My training told me to leave her. My orders told me to keep moving. Everything I'd been taught about the enemy told me that she was not worth saving." Daniel looked at Scifical. "But when I saw her there in the darkness, I didn't see an enemy. I saw a little girl who needed help. So I helped her. It was the simplest decision I ever made." He turned back to the assembly. "That child's name is Kethi. Her mother is Scifical, one of the most feared commanders in the Cathari military. When Scifical found out what I had done, she could have killed me. She had every right to. Instead, she offered me protection. She took me into her home. She let me see her people as they truly are." Daniel's voice grew stronger as he continued. "I have lived among the Cathari for months now. I have eaten their food and learned their language and watched them care for their children. They are not monsters. They are parents who tell stories to their young. They are artists who create beauty from nothing. They are people who grieve when they lose someone they love." He looked directly at the human admirals. "We have been told that the Cathari want to destroy us, that they will never stop until humanity is extinct. But that is not true. They want the same things we want. They want their children to grow up safe. They want their families to be together. They want this war to end." Then he looked at the Cathari leaders. "And you have been told that humans are violent and cruel and incapable of mercy. But that is not true either. Humans can be kind. Humans can be compassionate. Humans can look at an enemy child and see only a child who needs help. Daniel spread his hands in a gesture of openness. I am not special. I am just a medic who made a simple choice. But that choice led me here, to this moment, to this chance for something better. If I could choose mercy in the middle of a battlefield, then surely our governments can choose peace in this chamber. The room was silent when he finished. Daniel stood there feeling exposed and uncertain, wondering if his words had made any difference at all. Then something unexpected happened. A human officer stood up from the back of the room. He was an older man with a scarred face and haunted eyes. I was a prisoner of the HFY for 2 years, he said. During that time, one of them brought me food and water, even when he was ordered not to. He said it was wrong to let any creature suffer. I never forgot that. A HFY warrior rose from the other side. A human medic treated my wounds after a battle when she could have let me die. She said all life had value. I did not understand then. I think I understand now. One by one, others began to speak. Human soldiers shared stories of HFY who had shown unexpected kindness. HFY warriors spoke of humans who had chosen mercy over revenge. The stories were small and quiet, but together they formed something larger. They painted a picture of two peoples who had been taught to hate each other, but had never quite succeeded. The negotiations resumed with a different tone. There was still anger and mistrust, but there was also something else. A fragile hope that perhaps the war could end, that perhaps a better future was possible. It took 3 more days of exhausting talks, but finally an agreement was reached. A ceasefire would begin immediately. Prisoner exchanges would follow. Slowly, carefully, the two civilizations would begin the long process of learning to live in peace. Daniel stood on a balcony, overlooking the station's observation deck when Kathy found him. She had been brought to the negotiations by her mother, and now she climbed up onto the railing beside him, her compound eyes reflecting the distant stars. You did it, she said in her simple way. You made them stop fighting. I didn't do anything, Daniel replied. I just told them the truth. The real work of peace will take years. Kathy made the clicking sound that meant she disagreed. My mother says that great changes always begin with small actions. You saved me. Now you have saved millions more. Sithikal approached them from behind. She stood beside Daniel and looked out at the stars with him. My daughter is wise for her age. She gets that from me. Daniel laughed softly. It felt strange to laugh after everything that had happened, but also good. What happens now? Now we go home, Sithikal said. Both of us have work to do. You will be a bridge between our peoples. I will make sure that bridge is protected. She paused and looked at him with those 4 glowing eyes. You saved my daughter's life. Now you have helped save millions more. The debt is not repaid, but it has grown into something different. Something better. Daniel watched Kathy point at passing ships and named them in both languages. He felt the strange peace of standing between 2 worlds that had been at war and were now at the beginning of something new. I just did what anyone would do, he said quietly. Sithikal made the clicking sound that Daniel now knew was laughter. No, you did what only a human would do. That is why my people needed you. That is why both our peoples needed you. The stars stretched out before them, endless and full of possibility. The war was over. The healing could begin. And it had all started with one soldier who looked at an enemy child and saw only a child worth saving. That was the human way. And perhaps, in time, it would become the way of all peoples who looked up at the stars and dreamed of something better than war. The Cathari homeworld of Cathar was nothing like Daniel had imagined. He had expected a dark and hostile place, filled with warriors and weapons and the machinery of war. Instead, he found a world of strange beauty. Towering structures rose from the ground like giant shells, their surfaces covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change with the light. Gardens of alien plants filled the spaces between buildings, their colors so vivid that they hurt Daniel's human eyes. Scifical had brought him to her family compound, a massive structure that housed hundreds of Cathari from her bloodline. Daniel was given a room of his own, furnished with objects that had been adapted for human use. Someone had clearly gone to great effort to make him comfortable. He suspected that someone was Scifical, though she never mentioned it directly. The first few weeks were difficult. Daniel did not speak the Cathari language beyond a few basic words, and his translation device often failed to capture the subtle meanings behind their clicking speech. The other Cathari in the compound watched him with expressions he could not read. Some seemed curious. Others seemed hostile. A few simply ignored him as if he did not exist. But then there was Kethi. The small child appeared at his door on his third morning in the compound. Her broken arm had fully healed, and her exoskeleton had begun to darken into the deeper colors of an older juvenile. She clicked at him rapidly, far too fast for his translator to keep up. When he shook his head in confusion, she made a sound that was unmistakably a sigh of frustration. Then she grabbed his hand with one of her small clawed fingers and pulled him out of the room. From that moment on, Kathy became his guide and his teacher. She showed him the compound's gardens and taught him the names of plants in her language. She introduced him to other young Cathari, who stared at him with wide compound eyes, but eventually accepted his presence. She sat with him during meals and demonstrated which foods were safe for humans to eat. She corrected his pronunciation when he tried to speak Cathari words, clicking her mandibles in amusement at his terrible accent. Daniel found himself growing fond of the child in ways he had not expected. She was curious and energetic and stubborn, not so different from human children he had known. When she looked up at him with those large compound eyes, he did not see an alien creature. He saw a little girl who had been through something terrible and had somehow found the strength to trust again. One evening, Kathy led him to a high balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the alien sky in shades of purple and orange. She sat beside him and was quiet for a long time, which was unusual for her. "Why did you save me?" she asked finally. Her Cathari words came through his translator in a child's simple voice. Daniel thought carefully before answering. "Because you needed help. Because you were hurt and scared and alone. I couldn't just walk away from that. But I am Cathari. Your people and my people are enemies. We have been fighting for longer than I have been alive." "I know," Daniel said. "But when I saw you in that rubble, I didn't see an enemy. I saw a child. That was all that mattered." Kathy was silent again for a moment. Then she reached out with her small clawed hand and touched his face, a gesture of trust and affection in Cathari culture. "My mother says you have a Cathari heart. She says that is why you could do what other humans could not." Daniel did not know how to respond to that. He simply sat with Kathy on the balcony and watched the alien sunset paint the sky with impossible colors as the weeks passed. Daniel began to understand the Cathari in ways that no human ever had. He learned that their society was built around family bonds that extended across hundreds of individuals. He discovered that they created art by carving intricate patterns into their own exoskeletons, each design telling a story of their life. He watched them celebrate the birth of new children and mourn the death of elders with rituals that were strange but deeply meaningful. They were not the monsters that human propaganda had made them out to be. They were simply people, different in form but driven by the same things that drove humans. They loved their children. They honored their dead. They dreamed of a future where their families would be safe and happy. But not everyone accepted Daniel's presence, Sithikel faced growing opposition from the Dominion Council, the ruling body of Cathari civilization. Many council members viewed Daniel as a spy, a threat, an abomination that should be destroyed rather than protected. They demanded that Sithikel turn him over for interrogation and execution. Daniel was present when Sithikel faced the council. She stood before them without fear, her tall form radiating strength and confidence. "This human saved my daughter's life," she declared. "By the ancient laws of our people, he is bound to my household by a debt of honor. To harm him would be to harm me. To demand his death would be to demand mine. The ancient laws were written before we knew the threat that humans posed," one council member argued. "They cannot apply to creatures who have killed so many of our people." "The ancient laws are all we have," Sithikel responded. "Without them, we are no better than animals." This human showed mercy when he had every reason to show hatred. He looked at my daughter and saw not an enemy but a child in need. Is that not what we claim to value? Is that not what separates us from the beasts? The council debated for hours. In the end, they could not find a way to overrule the life debt without destroying traditions that held their society together. Daniel was allowed to stay, though many council members made clear that they would be watching him closely. That night, Sithikel came to Daniel's room. She seemed tired in a way that he had not seen before. "You have caused me much trouble," she said. "There are those who would see me stripped of my rank for protecting you." "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "I never meant to make things difficult for you." Sithikel made the clicking sound that meant dismissal. "Do not apologize. You saved my daughter. Everything that has followed is a consequence of that one act. I would not change what you did, even if I could." She paused and looked at him with her 4 glowing eyes. "I have received a message from human space. Your government wants you back. They are calling you a traitor and a deserter. But they are also asking questions through secret channels. They want to know if peace is possible. They want to know if someone can bridge the gap between our peoples." Daniel felt his heart begin to race. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that you may have a role to play that is larger than either of us imagined. The war has gone on too long. Both sides are exhausted. Both sides have lost too much." Sithikel moved toward the door and then stopped. "Rest now. Tomorrow, we must decide what comes next." She left Daniel alone with his thoughts. He stood at the window and looked out at the alien city that had somehow become his home. He thought about everything that had brought him here, from a destroyed settlement on a distant world to this moment of a terror, impossible possibility. Maybe one act of mercy could change everything after all. 3 months had passed since the day Daniel saved the alien child on Vethra Prime. The war between humans and the Cathari continued to rage across dozens of star systems. But Daniel was no longer part of the fighting. His commanders had decided that a soldier who showed mercy to the enemy could not be trusted on the front lines. They had transferred him to a medical station far behind the battle zones, where he spent his days treating wounded soldiers who were shipped back from the fighting. Daniel did not complain about his new assignment. He was tired of war, tired of killing, tired of watching young men and women die in a conflict that seemed to have no end. At least here he could do some good. He could save lives instead of taking them. He could heal instead of harm. The medical station was located on a small moon called Harkin's Rest. It was supposed to be safe, far away from any Cathari territory and protected by a network of defense satellites. The wounded soldiers who came through its doors often talked about going home once they recovered. They talked about families waiting for them and lives they wanted to return to. Daniel listened to their stories and did his best to give them hope. He thought about the alien child sometimes. He wondered if she was safe, if her arm had healed properly, if she ever thought about the human soldier who had pulled her from the rubble. He wondered about her mother too, the fearsome war mother who had knelt before him and spoken of life debts and sacred bonds. He did not fully understand what that meant, but the memory of that moment stayed with him like a splinter in his mind. It was late at night. When the attack began, Daniel was making his rounds through the recovery ward when the first explosion shook the station. The lights flickered and went out, replaced by the red glow of emergency lighting. Alarms blared through the corridors as confused voices shouted for information. Daniel grabbed a portable medical kit and ran toward the main entrance. What he saw there made his blood run cold. HFY warriors were pouring through a breach in the station's outer wall. They moved with deadly speed, their exoskeletons gleaming under the red lights as they cut down anyone in their path. But something was wrong. These HFY were different from the ones Daniel had fought before. Their armor was marked with strange symbols, and they attacked with a wild fury that seemed almost mindless. A young nurse named Linda grabbed Daniel's arm. Her face was pale with terror. "What do we do? The defense systems are down. There's no one to protect us." Daniel looked around at the chaos unfolding before him. Medical staff were running in every direction, trying to evacuate patients who could barely walk. Security personnel were doing their best to hold back the attackers, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. This was not a battle they could win. "Get as many patients as you can to the emergency shelters," Daniel told Linda. "I'll try to buy you some time." "You can't fight them alone," she protested. "I'm not planning to fight them," Daniel said. "I'm planning to slow them down." He moved through the station, helping wounded soldiers to their feet and pointing them toward the shelter corridors. He sealed blast doors behind him and activated fire suppression systems to create barriers of foam and smoke. He was not a warrior, but he was resourceful. Every second he could delay the attackers was a second that gave more people a chance to escape. But eventually, he ran out of tricks. Daniel found himself backed into a corner of the station's main treatment room. Around him lay patients too injured to move. Soldiers who had survived battles, only to die here in what should have been a place of healing. Daniel had nothing but a small sidearm and a handful of medical supplies. The HFY were coming. He could hear their clicking sounds echoing through the corridors. He thought about his life and all the things he had done. He thought about the soldiers he had saved and the ones he had lost. He thought about the alien child and her mother and wondered if his own death would somehow cancel out the life debt Sithakal had spoken of. It seemed like a strange thing to think about in his final moments. The door to the treatment room burst open, and HFY warriors flooded in. Daniel raised his weapon and prepared to die fighting. Then the wall behind the attackers exploded. New HFY poured through the breach, but these were different. Their armor was marked with the purple and gold colors that Daniel had seen once before. They crashed into the attacking warriors with devastating force, their claws and weapons cutting through the enemy like they were nothing. The battle was brief and brutal. Within minutes, the attackers lay dead on the floor. Daniel stood frozen, his weapon still raised, unable to process what had just happened. Then he saw her. Sithakal stepped through the smoke and debris like a figure from a dream. Her exoskeleton was splattered with the blood of her enemies, and her compound eyes burned with fierce light. She walked past the bodies of the fallen attackers without a second glance and stopped directly in front of Daniel. "You are unharmed," she said. It was not a question. Daniel lowered his weapon slowly. "How did you know? How did you find me?" "I have been watching you," Sithakal replied. "Since the day you saved my daughter, I have kept track of your movements. When I learned that rogue elements of my own people planned to attack this station, I came immediately." "Rogue elements?" "There are those among the HFY who oppose any possibility of peace with humans. They seek to continue the war until one side is completely destroyed. They attack this station to provoke a response, to ensure that the fighting never ends." Sithakal's mandibles clicked with what might have been disgust. "They are fools. Daniel looked around at the devastation surrounding them. The medical station was in ruins. People had died tonight, people he had tried to save. But many more would have died if Sithikel had not come. "You saved us," he said quietly. "I saved you," Sithikel corrected him. "The others were simply fortunate to be near you when I arrived." She paused and studied him with those glowing eyes. "The life debt remains, Daniel Cooper. It will remain for as long as we both live. I told you this on Vethra Prime, but I do not think you understood. I'm starting to understand now." Sithikel made a sound that might have been approval. "Good, because I have come to offer you a choice. You can remain here in human space, where you will always be seen with suspicion. Your own people cannot trust you because you showed mercy to an enemy child. They will never fully accept you again." Daniel knew she was right. He had felt the cold looks and heard the whispered comments ever since Vethra Prime. He was a soldier who had crossed a line that other soldiers would not cross. That made him dangerous in the eyes of his own commanders. "Or?" he asked. "Or you can come with me to Kethari space," Sithikel said. "You will be granted sanctuary and protection. You will be treated as a member of my household, bound to my family by the debt you created when you saved my daughter." She paused. "Kathy asks about you. Every day, she asks when she will see the human who carried her through the fire." Daniel felt something shift inside him. He thought about everything he had lost in this war, everything he had given up, everything he had become. Then he thought about a small alien child with soft blue exoskeleton and frightened eyes who had trusted him when she had every reason not to. "When do we leave?" he asked, Sithikel's mandibles spread in what Daniel now recognized as a Kethari smile. "Immediately." The dropship hung in the air like a dark cloud waiting to release a storm. Daniel could feel the eyes of his entire squad on him as he stood there holding the alien child. Lieutenant Vance had her weapon raised and aimed at the ship, ready to give the order to fire at the first sign of attack. The other soldiers were tense and afraid, their fingers hovering over their triggers, but no attack came. Instead, the dropship slowly descended and landed on a flat piece of ground about 50 feet away from the squad. The engines powered down with a low hum that Daniel could feel in his bones. For a long moment, nothing happened. The silence was so heavy that Daniel could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Then a hatch opened on the side of the ship, and a single figure emerged that Daniel had seen many Kethari in his years of fighting this war. He had faced warriors in close combat and watched their armored forms charge across battlefields. But he had never seen one like this. She was tall, over 7 feet, with an exoskeleton that shimmered with colors of deep purple and gold. Her compound eyes seemed to glow with an inner light, and the markings on her armor indicated a rank higher than any Daniel had encountered before. She walked toward them with slow and deliberate steps. She carried no weapon. Her forearms hung at her sides in a posture that was almost relaxed, as if she were taking a casual stroll rather than approaching a group of armed enemy soldiers. "Take the shot," Private Shaw whispered. His rifle was aimed directly at the approaching alien. "She's right there. We can end this." "Hold your fire," Lieutenant Vance said through gritted teeth. She was clearly struggling with the decision herself. Something's not right here. Why would a high-ranking Kethari approach us alone and unarmed? The alien stopped about 20 feet from Daniel. Up close, she was even more impressive and terrifying. Her mandibles clicked softly as she studied him with those glowing compound eyes. The translation software in Daniel's earpiece crackled to life as she spoke. "You are the one who pulled her from the rubble. I watched through the surveillance drones. I saw what you did." Daniel swallowed hard, but did not look away. "She was hurt and trapped. I couldn't just leave her there. Why?" The question was sharp and demanding. "She is Kethari. Your enemy. Your people have killed thousands of mine. Why would you save one of our children?" Daniel looked down at the small creature in his arms. She had stopped trembling and was now watching the tall female with eyes that held recognition and longing. This was her mother, Daniel realized. This terrifying warrior was the mother of the child he had saved. "Because she's a child," Daniel said simply. "That's the only reason I needed." The alien female was silent for a long moment. The wind blew across the ruined settlement, carrying smoke and dust between them. Daniel's squad mates remained frozen in their defensive positions, ready to open fire at any second. The tension was so thick it was hard to breathe. Then the alien did something that made everyone gasp. She lowered her massive body down to one knee. She bent her head forward, exposing the back of her neck where the exoskeleton was thin and vulnerable. It was a position of complete submission, Daniel realized. A position where anyone could kill her with a single strike. "I am Scythical," she said. Her voice through the translator had lost its coldness and now carried something that sounded almost like grief. "War Mother of the 3rd Dominion Fleet, I have led campaigns against your people. I have ordered the destruction of your ships and the deaths of your soldiers. I am your enemy in every way that matters." She paused and lifted her head just enough to look at Daniel. "But you saved my daughter. You treated her wounds when your own people told you to leave her. You held her when she was afraid. For this, I owe you a debt that my entire lifetime cannot repay." Lieutenant Vance stepped forward, her weapon still raised. This could be a trap. She could be stalling while more of them surround us. "There are no others," Scythical said. "I came alone. I searched for my daughter for 3 days. I believed she was dead. I came here to recover her body, to bring her home for the death rituals of our people." Her voice cracked slightly on the last words. "But she is alive. Because of him." She rose to her full height and fixed her gaze on Daniel. "In the old ways of my people, a life debt is sacred. It cannot be broken or forgotten. You have saved the life of my child, and so your life is now bound to mine. I am responsible for you as I am responsible for her." "What does that mean?" Daniel asked. He was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "It means I will protect you," Scythical said. "It means that any enemy of yours becomes an enemy of mine. It means that for as long as I draw breath, no harm will come to you if I can prevent it." She paused and looked at the child in his arms. "Give me my daughter, and know that from this moment forward, you are not my enemy. You are something my people have no word for. You are the one who showed mercy when none was expected." Daniel walked forward slowly. He could feel the horrified stares of his squadmates burning into his back. He could hear Lieutenant Vance hissing at him to stop, to come back, to think about what he was doing. But he kept walking until he stood directly in front of Scythical. Gently, carefully, he placed the small child into her mother's waiting arms. Scythical held her daughter close. And for just a moment, the fearsome war mother looked like nothing more than a relieved parent. She made soft clicking sounds that the child answered with clicks of her own. It was a private conversation that Daniel could not understand, but somehow felt in his heart. Then Scythical looked at him again. Her 4 eyes seemed to see right through him, past the uniform and the weapon and the years of war, down to something deeper. "You have created a bond that cannot be undone," she said. "My people do not forget kindness. Neither do I. We will meet again, human. And when we do, you will understand the true weight of what you have done today." She turned and walked back to her dropship with her daughter cradled against her chest. Daniel watched them go, feeling like the entire universe had shifted around him. He did not know what the future held. He did not know if he had just made a terrible mistake or done the most important thing of his life. But as the dropship rose into the sky and disappeared into the clouds, he knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The ground shook as another explosion lit up the sky over Vethra Prime. Sergeant Daniel. Cooper pressed his back against a broken wall and checked his medical kit for the third time in the last hour. His hands were steady even though his heart was racing. 3 years of war had taught him how to stay calm when everything around him was falling apart. The Cathari had held this settlement for months before the Terran coalition finally pushed through their defenses. Now the buildings were nothing but rubble and smoke. Daniel could hear gunfire in the distance as his squad moved forward to secure the area. He was a combat medic, which meant his job was to follow the soldiers and patch them up when they got hurt. He had saved many lives in this war. He had also lost many. The ones he lost stayed with him at night when he tried to sleep. Lieutenant Nina Vance gave the signal to advance. She was a tough woman with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death. Daniel respected her even though she scared him a little. She made hard decisions without blinking, and she expected her soldiers to follow orders without question. Daniel moved through the destroyed streets with his squad. The Cathari bodies lay scattered among the ruins. They were insectoid creatures with hard exoskeletons and compound eyes that reflected the light in strange ways. Their mandibles could crush bone, and their claws could tear through armor. Humans had been taught to fear them, to hate them, to see them as monsters from a nightmare. Daniel had killed his share of them. He did not enjoy it, but he did what he had to do to survive and to protect his fellow soldiers. The squad reached a collapsed building that looked like it might have been a home once. The walls had fallen inward, and the roof was nothing but scattered pieces of metal and stone. Daniel was about to move past it when he heard something. It was a small sound, almost too quiet to notice over the distant gunfire. But Daniel had good ears, and something about that sound made him stop. Private Kevin Shaw looked at him with confusion. "What is it, Sarge?" Daniel held up his hand for silence. He listened again. There it was. A soft clicking sound, almost like a whimper. It was coming from beneath the rubble. "We need to keep moving," Lieutenant Vance said. Her voice was hard and impatient. "Command wants this sector cleared within the hour." "There's something under there," Daniel said. He was already moving toward the collapsed structure. "Someone. It's probably just a wounded hostile," Vance replied. "Leave it. We don't have time." Daniel ignored her. He dropped to his knees and started pulling away pieces of broken stone and twisted metal. The clicking sound grew louder, more frightened. His squad mates watched him with a mixture of curiosity and annoyance. They wanted to finish this mission and get back to base where it was safe. They did not understand why Daniel was digging through enemy rubble. Then Daniel saw her. She was small, so small that he almost did not recognize what she was at first. A Cathari child, maybe 4 years old by human standards. Her exoskeleton was a soft blue color that had not yet hardened into the dark armor of an adult. One of her forearms was bent at a bad angle, clearly broken. Her compound eyes were clouded with pain and terror. As she looked up at the human looming over her, Daniel felt something twist in his chest. He had seen Cathari warriors charge at him with murder in their eyes. He had watched them tear his friends apart. But this was not a warrior. This was a child, alone and hurt and afraid. She was no different from any human child who had been caught in the crossfire of this endless war. "What the hell is that?" Private Shaw asked. He had moved closer and was staring at the small creature with disgust on his face. "Is that a baby bug?" "It's a child," Daniel said quietly. He reached into the rubble and carefully lifted her out. She weighed almost nothing. Her small body trembled against his chest as she made those soft clicking sounds that he now understood were cries of fear. "Put it down," Lieutenant Vance ordered. Her hand moved to her sidearm. "That thing is the enemy, Cooper. It'll grow up to kill humans just like the rest of them." "She's hurt," Daniel said. He was already opening his medical kit with one hand while cradling the child with the other. "I'm going to treat her wounds. That's an order, Sergeant." Daniel looked up at his commanding officer. He had never disobeyed an order in his entire military career. He had always done what he was told because he believed in the chain of command and the importance of discipline. But he could not do what Vance was asking. He could not leave this child to die in the rubble of her destroyed home. "No, ma'am," he said. The words felt strange in his mouth. "I won't do that." Vance stared at him for a long moment. The other soldiers shifted nervously, unsure of what to do. This was not something they had trained for. This was not in any manual or protocol. Daniel turned his attention back to the child. He applied a splint to her broken arm, moving slowly and gently so he would not frighten her more than she already was. He gave her a small dose of pain medication from his kit. Her clicking sounds gradually softened as the medicine took effect. Her compound eyes watched him with something that might have been confusion or wonder. "You're going to be okay," Daniel told her, even though he knew she could not understand his words. "I've got you. You're safe now." Private Shaw spat on the ground. "This is insane. We're in the middle of a war zone, and you're playing doctor with the enemy's kid." "She's not my enemy," Daniel said. "She's just a scared little girl." Before anyone could respond, the sky suddenly darkened. Daniel looked up and saw a Kethari dropship descending through the smoke and clouds. It was sleek and dangerous, built for speed and combat. His squad mates raised their weapons and took defensive positions behind whatever cover they could find, but the dropship did not fire. It hovered above them like a predator, deciding whether to strike. Then a sound cut through all their communication devices, a voice that was translated by their combat software into harsh and broken English. "You have my daughter." The voice was female, cold with barely controlled fury. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine, even as he tightened his grip on the child in his arms. The little Kethari stirred against his chest and made a soft sound that could only be one thing. She was calling for her. Mother. Daniel looked up at the hovering dropship and knew that everything was about to change. He had made his choice when he pulled this child from the rubble. Now he would have to face the consequences of that choice, whatever they might be. He did not know if he would survive the next few minutes. But as he felt the small alien child trembling in his arms, he knew he had done the right thing. He would do it again without hesitation.